Hello. All right, so it looks like I've stirred up a lot of conversation about the topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is our core wounds. So let's get into that. So today we're going to talk about a concept that is really, really key to understanding what's going on or what's going on behind what's happening in your love life, which you may not be aware of as kind of running things that are happening for you. So as you're hopping on, you can say hi and let me know where you are watching from. I like to know who's on with me. I like to know where you are in the world. So say hello and we will get started. Okay, so in this live, I'm going to talk about what a core wound is, because I use this term a lot. So what do I mean when I say core wound? How does it impact your love life? And then where or what can you start to do about it? Okay, so first of all, hi Brianna. So fun. Literally was just on a call with you. Okay, so first of all, most people never get a transformed love life because most people don't ever heal their core wound. Okay, so you can use all the affirmations, all the mantras, all the positive thinking that you want, and it's not actually going to shift something like your anxious attachment or your avoidant attachment or your hardwired beliefs that like, I'm not good enough, I'm going to be abandoned, or trauma-based responses that create unhappy relationships like fighting, arguments, cheating, people-pleasing, all these different things, lack of boundaries, right? So none of those things get fixed by just like thinking positive, okay? So this is because of what I call kind of like sticky thoughts or sticky beliefs or even sticky emotions that we have. And it's not possible to just positive think your way out of it by ignoring where it comes from. Okay, so these are things that we continually return to that are really deeply embedded in our psychology, our belief system, our perception of ourselves, our perception of other, and in our nervous systems. Okay, so a core wound is a response to something that happened in childhood, one time or repeatedly. Okay, so a core wound doesn't even have to have been from just like one event. It could have been a repeated thing that was happening to you. So oftentimes, this core wound gets blocked out and emotionally numbed, so it's not actually present to us in our day-to-day living, okay? So we have no idea that it's operating behind the scenes to shape our love lives. Like for me, I didn't know that my dad dying had had such a huge impact on me, and that it created for me that I was going to be abandoned, right? Which is sometimes called the abandonment wound. And that created a pattern in my life of that actually being the case. Like I would feel like I was abandoned. I would be abandoned by someone. And that was the great fear that I had all the time. And it was driving everything for me. Not aware of that until I started to do some work around this. Okay, so my clients hadn't realized like the lack of time or attention they had with their working father was impacting them now, that their dads disapproved of certain things about them or expected them to be in certain ways that were inauthentic and created basically like disempowered people-pleasing patterns where they didn't have appropriate boundaries and self-worth. Or that their mother's critical voice kind of becomes their own voice, like that I need to lose weight to be good enough, or I need to look or act a certain way in order to be good enough, to be worthy of love, to be acceptable. Usually it comes down to like being worthy or good enough, right? Or they didn't realize that the father who left them and got remarried was creating like basically a tragic love life in which they were pushing men away, responding with hurt and anger, holding on to men who weren't committed to them or trying to prove themselves of being worthy of love, went back to that. And because these core wounds are so deeply embedded in us, what it does is it shapes literally all of our perceptions. So we can't see outside of our current perception. Like it seems like that's just truth. There is nothing else. They're so deeply embedded. What it does is it shapes our perceptions, not just of others, also of ourselves and of situations. It shapes our emotions, our emotional responses, our knee-jerk reactions, like what we'll actually do, and basically our nervous system wiring. So this is where the anxious or the avoidant attachment comes from. It creates this traumatic relationship cycle and patterns that you experience in your life then. And what the core wound is designed to do is it's designed to keep repeating itself. That's what trauma does. So our core wounds are choosing our partners. Our core wounds are choosing our emotional responses. They are choosing our reactions and responses. They are choosing the environment that our relationship will actually have, like what it will be like to be in that relationship. And I see this 100% of the time, okay? So this is why I can say, and I did say earlier, that I don't know any women who complain that they only can find unavailable men who are not, in really significant ways, actually unavailable themselves, okay? Why? Because who we choose is a mirror of us. It's a mirror, actually, of our core wound. So we go out there subconsciously looking for unavailable men and falling in love with them because our wound doesn't want us to have an available partner, and we are not available ourselves because of the wound, right? So this is why you can simultaneously find unavailable men boring and have a lack of chemistry or no spark, and this is turning those men away or leading them on or breaking their hearts, right? This is actually you being unavailable, but then at the same time being like, all of the men that I meet are unavailable. Well, you just only see half of who is actually out there, right? So you just don't see yourself doing the exact same thing that these quote unquote unavailable men are doing, and you absolutely are doing it. Like, actually look and see, right? So it can be really hard to admit, can be hard to see, but really freeing once you do recognize that, because it means that you're not a victim to unavailable men. And sometimes we actually can decide a man is available because it fits our perceptions, our worldview, and then we end up manufacturing a situation where that's true, or evidence that that's true when it's actually not. I did that. Okay, so the connection between the core wound and our love blueprint is that our core wound is what our love blueprint is built on. This is why it's foundational. Everyone has at least one core wound. It either came from your mother, your father, or you have a different wound from each parent, or just from the relationship that your parents had itself. And these wounds are at the heart of the love blueprint. So your entire life is built around trying to compensate for that wound. It's kind of like having a blister on your foot, and it's really painful when you step on it. So your entire way of walking has to compensate for like trying not to step on that blister, right? It changes how you walk, how you move, how you be in the world, right? This is what the core wound does, right? It changes your emotional set point, your romantic relationships, your behaviors in dating, in relationships, who you choose, whether or not you're anxious or avoidant or some combo of that, because sometimes we can be both, and your whole meaning system around yourself and men and relationships. It's all built around that core wound. Okay, so your love blueprint was actually created as a way to function while still having an unhealed wound underneath, right? This is like how you've got the blister on the bottom of your foot. You have to walk differently. So it's like a Band-Aid that was put over the wound so you can get on with life and try not to touch it or reopen it. It's trying to protect you, but it does a really bad job of that because it actually doesn't know that the original wound isn't based on your present, and it still thinks you're the 5-year-old whose dad died. It made it mean that then she was always going to be abandoned. I'm speaking about myself, right? So it says, don't ever get abandoned again. And what you need to do in order for that not to happen is blah, blah, blah. And this is how your love blueprint then functions in the world, right? Make sure that you are hyper vigilant about every guy you like, track him constantly, that he won't surprise you, abandon you. You should always assume that he's going to abandon you, though. That's going to be safer, right? Make sure you get constant reassurance that he's not going to leave. Make sure that you really catch him, what you want him to really chase you. Make sure that you've really caught him, right? So make sure that you come up with all the ways that he could chase you and learn all the ways that you have to do that, because if he's not chasing, then he's going to be the one who abandons you. Or make sure that you always look hot and beautiful. If you don't, he might lose interest. Or make sure you're always the fun, cool girl. Don't put too much pressure on him or he might abandon you. Don't ask for what you really want. He might abandon you. Be really understanding and patient or he might abandon you. Choose a guy who will abandon you, right? Because actually all guys will. So let's just recreate that. And also choose a guy who won't abandon you. And then this is where you choose the guy who you're not really in love with, right? Because then at least you won't be abandoned, because that would be worse. right? So this is one love blueprint, right? This is one way it's looking. It's going to look different for you, for how you decided to function subconsciously, unconsciously around that wound. So what does your wound tell you to do? You likely aren't aware of all the ways that it's controlling what you can and cannot do, what's possible and what's impossible. In fact, you are 100% not aware of this because it's all operating at the subconscious level. So it's kind of like what one of my clients said. It's like you're walking on this straight and narrow path with beautiful meadow on both sides, and there's this invisible wall that you can't walk through to get off that path. Like you're stuck on that path, you cannot get off. And so it seems like you have choice about who you can be and how you can show up, but in reality, that wound is making sure that you stay on the straight and narrow of that path. And this is something that she started to understand as we started to do the work, right? Because then she was actually able to step off the path when we started to heal the wound. So why does it want to create this sort of straitjacket for you? Well, actually, it is to protect you. It exists to help you avoid the pain of that original wounding. And additionally, it does not just control you. It wants to control everybody around you as well, right? We want people to act in certain ways that don't trigger the wound so as to protect us from feeling the pain of that unhealed wound. So he needs to do, or he needs to say or be X, right? He needs to text me every day. He needs to tell me he loves me. Whatever it is for you, right? That's the wound trying to control someone because it needs to feel safe. So secretly, we're all kind of control freaks, to be honest, right? Like we're codependent because of that wound, needing people to be in certain ways, at least when the wound is unhealed. Because you're always working around it, actually not knowing you're being controlled by it. So it gets triggered constantly despite your best efforts. And this can lead to self-sabotaging behaviors, emotions, thought patterns, right? And the kinds of experiences that we get to have in love are limited, right, by the blueprint that we hold, which is based around that core wound. So healing the core wound is the fundamental step in my work. If this isn't addressed, then nothing else you do actually sticks. You don't actually get lasting change because that's still there. It's still the blister on your foot that you have to walk around or not walk on, right? So I see this time and time again that clients come to me and they have done a lot of work on themselves, but the core wound hasn't been addressed and it hasn't been healed. And it's the number one thing we first have to do before we can do anything else to be like anything else is going to be as effective, right? It's like the first thing we have to go to. So if you know that, if you see it, right? And if you know that you recognize yourself in this is what I work with clients on. It's the first thing I work with them on. And I have decided to open up spaces for women who want to change their love lives to rewire their love blueprint by healing the core wound, right? So it was after this work that clients have manifested partners, healed the root of their inner critic, the voice that says you're not enough, that's always in their heads, no longer being bullied by that, gained access to self-worth, to their voice, after a breakup or in a divorce and in many other situations in a relationship itself, healed the pain of a breakup in really fast time, like a month, healed the cause of their emotional coping mechanisms. That's like disordered eating or drinking or overworking or whatever that is for you, that emotional crutch. We're able to let down their avoidant attachment and defensive protective walls. We're actually able to heal the avoidant attachment or anxious attachment, right? And then call in that perfect partner, getting rid of the fear of abandonment, set boundaries, have like really hard conversations that they would not have been able to have before. Discover the cause of like push-pull dynamics in a relationship, which in this case came from a father wound, and actually were able to end that, gain compassion and forgiveness towards their parents, towards themselves, towards partners or ex-partners, and gain the courage to actually hold boundaries. All of these things happen through working with that core wound and then what we layer up on top of that. So if you aren't ready to jump in to a 3-month one-on-one intensive, if that's not for you yet, if you want to work your way up to that, I have created something to get you started on your path. And it's called the Heal the Core Wound 1-month intensive, where we do literally just that. I find out what your core wound or wounds are, and then we spend 1 month diving really deep into where they come from and healing them with my really incredibly effective, incredibly fast transformational method for doing that. Okay, so the investment here is in healing the cause of basically emotional pain, anxiety, anger, sadness, low self-worth, people-pleasing, toxic coping behaviors, on, right? It is $2,000 for this, okay? So this would be 1 month. I only have 4 spots open for this version, right? The rest are being saved for someone who's working with me longer, but this is a really good place to start. So if June is your month to get your patterns in love worked out, then you can message me and I can get you set up. You also may have noticed, just want to say, that my prices have recently increased, and I want you to know that this will continue to happen as I grow, as I learn, as I develop myself and my skill set, and as my clients continue to get these mind-blowing results and transformations. So, like, I have spent $2,000 on multiple group programs that were run with like 150 other people, had zero personal attention, not designed specifically for me. They were held in Facebook groups, on Facebook Lives. There was no in-person anything, right? So this is to give you an idea of what an incredible price it is, because you actually get me, 100% of my intention and my brain on you, going into the corners of your mind, what is inside, what's going on, what's that patterning, and pulling out the foundation of what's been holding you back in love. So if you're always attracting unavailable men, or if you know that you're unavailable but are actually ready to not be, if you are still hurting from a breakup, having issues in relationships that do not get resolved, this is because you need to work on the core wound, right? So if you want this, if you really want to figure out what's causing the patterns that you're experiencing and actually call in the right guy pretty fast, if you want to find a way to make that happen, I really want you to know that this is for you. You can actually have that, and I want you to be able to have that with the work that I do, which is so incredibly effective. So just a few suggestions. If money is your biggest issue, there are multiple ways to make money appear for you, right? So the first one, and this is one that I have used like when I needed to take out 5K on a program that I really wanted, is that you can take out a PayPal loan for 6 months that's interest-free, right? Like interest-free for 6 months, which is really incredible. So that's an option for you. You can put it on a credit card, or some of it on a card, some of it in PayPal. You can borrow from a family member, right? There are many, many ways to make this work if you really want it. Okay, so if money is the thing that's stopping you from doing this work with me, then send me a message, tell me what's going on, and I'm going to coach you through. I can coach you through your fears and your concerns around this. Because when there is a will, when there's a really strong desire and value is truly being placed on something, then there's always a way. So you can find a way to make this happen if this is what you really want. Okay? All right, so I'm going to sign off now. I hope that this was helpful, gives you a really solid understanding of what the core wound is and what may be going on for you. And I will see you next time. All right, bye for now.